Hello. Well, on X right now, there's a letter sent by our esteemed Office of Communications, that is Ofcom, to gab.com, laying out the rules for the new Online Safety Act. Online safety. Who could possibly argue with that? And it's supposed to protect us, the naive public, from seeing things that might corrupt our soft little brains. What are those things? Well as the rules about child exploitation, which is illegal anyway, there's a lot of small print, the sort of small print that our small little brains can't comprehend, and they sort of hope we're not seeing. And it's in the small print that we see such words as hate speech and non-crime hate incidents. Crimes and non-crimes which depend solely on how the government feels about whatever at any given time. And the question I have to ask you is, do you trust the present government to judge all of these crimes and non-crimes dispassionately? Well, do you? And do you believe that no government because remember, this law will apply to the next government and the next one and the next one. So if you're a raving lefty watching this and you're saying, yes, I trust this government to act honourably. Yes, but what if the next government is a Tory government? Even worse, what if it's being run by Reform? Can you guarantee that no government ever, in perpetuity, will try to exert unfriendly control over us, ever? If you have your doubts about that, then perhaps you might have the idea that the Online Safety Act is just another dangerous foray into systemic control put forward by a government of student ideologues who think that the stuff they dreamt up 20 years ago over a spliff in their student dorm is actually workable. I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. And this is the letter from Ofcom. Dear Sir, Madam, well, at least they've given only two possible genders here. Advisory letter. This is just to warn you. It's like, those mafia guys who come up and sort of dust off your lapel and say, well, I don't feel bad about it, but my friend here. Anyway, this is an advisory letter, illegal content risk assessments, your duties under the Online Safety Act. We're contacting you from the Office of Communications, Ofcom. Not a trace of irony in this Newspeak type name, by the way. The UK's communications regulator. The Act imposes duties on a range of online service providers, including to keep people who use their service safe from illegal content. You see, because the important thing is to be safe. Remember that. These duties cover the following types of online services: user-to-user, search services. That means, whatever you search for, they're responsible. Hang on, let's go on. And if you there's more. I seem to be losing some of it. Anyway, you're getting the idea. First, all providers of regulated services, so they're already regulated, are required to carry out an illegal content risk assessment by the 16th of March. This means you must assess the risks of harm on your service associated with priority offences and other illegal content. I mean, that's like, risk assessment. It could be anything, absolutely anything. And a few days ago, as you can see, Ofcom sent this letter to Gab telling them that they had to comply with the Online Safety Act or face the consequences. If you haven't read the Online Safety Act, and I wouldn't blame you if you haven't, you might not realise the levels of Byzantine bureaucracy that compliance requires. I just gave you a taste there, but I can't read you the whole thing. But this includes determining the age of the users, being responsible for whatever pops up on their site. So no more, we're just a platform type excuse. And I kid you not, turning in detailed plans on how they are protecting users from all the different sorts of possible harms, from the serious stuff like child exploitation to wokery like legal but harmful. Then there's misinformation, which is almost anything you want it to be. Do you remember the misinformation about COVID being a lab leak? And platforms have to submit risk assessments for everyone. In other words, while not making such platforms illegal, you can see that Ofcom, or the government using Ofcom, is attempting to drown them in procedure. Andrew Torba, who's head of Gab, says he's not going to comply. We will not comply. We will not pay 1 cent. That's of the fines that will be levied for non-compliance. We will defend our UK users' right to speak freely and reject any law that compels censorship. Their letter and the response from our legal team is attached. And that means he'll be facing some sort of a legal battle about whose turf the internet actually is. Certainly, it looks like he's going to be relying on the strength of the US government in enforcing its free speech laws. Now, before anyone starts blaming the Labour Party, I do blame them, but that's only because they didn't close it down. Because I have to remind you that it was the Conservatives, the party of free speech, who put this Frankenstein monster of a piece of legislation on the operating table in 2023. All the Labour Party has done is pull the lever to galvanise it into life. And like the Frankenstein monster, I have a feeling it'll lumber about, randomly destroying things until finally it turns on the government that set it into motion. I suppose one of the first options for Gab would be to withdraw its use in the UK. If they can't use other legal systems, that's what they'll do, like Rumble did in France. Gab won't lose customers on that. People will simply start using VPNs in greater numbers. It's going to be, I can see the VPN companies just sort of rubbing their hands over that prospect. And people will use the VPNs and, of course, develop a bottomless contempt for a government that makes laws it can't enforce. There's something, when a government makes laws that people can get around, it develops a habit among the people of getting around laws that they see as unworkable and unfair. Yeah, there will be a few small fish, non-VPNers, caught up in its net, in the government's net, like those poor buggers who made hurty Facebook posts after the Stockport protests, for instance. Small fish pour encourager les autres. But in general, the sort of people who use Gab of all platforms, they'll be the sort who know all sorts of ways round regulations, ways I can't even imagine, and far beyond VPNs. Of course, the government could then try cracking down on the VPNs themselves. They might try that, but that's going to destroy British industries and businesses as well, because VPNs are needed for international communication. If I work in a business here in the United Kingdom and then I'm working in China, I might need to have meetings with people in the United Kingdom and use a VPN to be in the United Kingdom for the content I'm trying to access. So that's going to shut down all sorts of communications. What happens to governments or countries where communications are cut down? Well, let me give you one example, because the Middle East is one of my major points of study. I think it was in the 16th century, when the Ottoman Empire forbade the printing press. They saw what was happening in Europe and thought this is going to destabilise their country. Also, the scribes would have less work to do. And so they stopped printing altogether. You couldn't print anything. Interestingly enough, the first printing presses that finally did make it into the Ottoman Empire were owned by Jews who made the case that they didn't object to printing their holy books, and they would use the printing presses for that purpose. But that was the only printing in the Ottoman Empire until, I don't remember when it was, but it was the 1800s. I mean, it was ridiculous. And what happened to the Ottoman Empire? Complete stagnation. They had no books, they couldn't communicate, complete stagnation. In fact, the last a couple of hundred years of the Ottoman Empire, they were actually being propped up in place by the British. But that's another story. Okay, so if they stop the VPNs, they'll cause this sort of trouble for people trying to conduct international conversations. And in any case, VPNs are usually sited outside the UK. So Ofcom will be playing a constant game of whack-a-mole with them. Well, I suppose it'll give them something to do, because there won't be any industry or business going on. That would leave the government with the embarrassment of having pushed through unworkable legislation or going for broke and making things worse. One possibility they might try, and now I'm positing a sort of nightmare scenario, but who knows with this government, the government might try forcing every internet user to register for a digital ID, which can then be used to switch them off if they access the wrong websites. I mean, that's not entirely outside the bounds of possibility. But again, as I said, this is going to cause mayhem for any British commerce. The other thing is they could try and force the hardware manufacturers to embed kill software for certain websites that the government deems to be, not nice. Like Gab, for instance. And they could get the banks involved to cut funds for non-compliant users or companies. They could, of course, get GCHQ to watch all our internet interactions. Oh, there's plenty of room for expansion there. Now, before you start panicking, I doubt they'll be able to do any of that stuff. They'll try, I think, but all of this would completely destroy the UK's international reach. So I can imagine that big businesses, people like BlackRock, would stop the government long before these laws are shoehorned into the British economy. Of course, they could negotiate exemptions, I suppose, but it's going to make things very difficult. You never know. They could be just stupid enough to try it, of course. My prediction is that they'll arrest and crucify a few small fish, but they'll be unable to control everything. The result would be that the British public, especially the tech-savvy public, and you don't have to be very tech-savvy to get into VPNs or whatever, we develop even more contempt for the government than we already have. I know, it seems next to impossible to have any more contempt for them than we have right now. But if I have it right, there is no bottom to this sort of a situation. I'm sorry to have to tell you, in the case of contempt for government, it's turtles all the way down. Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.